All right, so I'm gonna get started. I have my introduction here. Ito shout out matrabaho o marishi hitinaga bagish heads makash etarashio khobari akush heads matawara na huya bergatobads midit kanagids adi akhorigi arurahare sherohag hashak mirahati arawagush mahakwats mabehe pero danusha mihabits. So hello friends and relatives. My Hidatsa name is Pink Blossom. My English name is Lisa. I'm from Mandan, but right now I currently live in Bismarck. I'm the Prairie Chicken Clan. And so I want to thank everybody here and also to the Knife River Park staff for inviting me to speak to you all about the Hidatsa language. And so today I have a little bit of a Google slide for you all. And so I wanted to cover a little bit of the history, geography, some of the grammar, and also Hidatsa's relationships to the other tribes. And so to start off, we call our language Hidatsa Idrogre, or Hidatsa Idrogre. Slide. Next one. Okay, so what I want to show you, this is pretty much, so Hidatsa began by being related to all of these other tribes. And so if you guys, let me see, I want to find my pointer here. And then if you guys want to try to find Hidatsa, it's over here in this left corner. So this is the Siouan language family tree. And this is a pretty much, I figured this would be a simple one to kind of understand. The source is on the bottom. I believe a linguist named Robert Rankin, who I'm pretty sure he specializes in Siouan languages. He created this for a presentation. And so Hidatsa, right here, if you guys are, for those of you who might not know, the Crow came from the Hidatsa, and there's a lot of similarities between Crow and Hidatsa, but also, of course, a lot of the other, mostly plain Siouan languages. And so off to the right here, we have our chronology. So all of these tribes that we know today at one time were one. And so linguistically, this is what Proto-Siouan, there's a lot of guesses as to how Proto-Siouan would have sounded based off of the studies that have been done on these different Siouan languages. And so this is also split up geographically. So I'll show you a map that I had on the next slide. I'll kind of go back and forth between this one and the next one. So I know they say not to use Wikipedia, but this is a graphic that's on there. The source is on the bottom here. And so they have these listed in numbers, but I kind of wanted to show them, you know, not as numbers. So you can kind of see where the origin of the Siouan language would be the Ohio River Valley, and the different tribes migrating and reproducing and spreading out into different areas of the U.S. And so you see some related tribal groups and languages, Tudo, Saponi, Ofo, Catawba over here on the East Coast, and then you have some here. And then the Upper Northern Plains, of course, where we are at too. So if you haven't noticed, Hidatsa and Mandan are both Siouan languages. And so there's actually a degree of mutual intelligibility between the Crow, Hidatsa, Mandan, and I even know just a little bit. I don't know if they would be considered wholly, you know, understandable by speaking one language, because I don't know all the languages. So, but I know there's a lot of similarities and a lot of there's a lot of words that are identical and a lot of sounds. And so for especially a lot of the Eastern Siouan languages, a lot of them are either extinct or sleeping. And of course, over on this side, up here, so you can see the language tree kind of point to these ones over here and the Eastern Siouan languages over here. A lot of these are dormant or extinct. And then, of course, our languages are endangered. And so I know for Hidatsa, Hidatsa is considered severely endangered. And so I think there is less than 30 fluent speakers as of right now. So that's pretty, and there's not really any youth or children, who are fluent speakers. So sadly, that's the trend of language loss has been pretty steady since colonization, since our indigenous peoples being pushed out of our land and space, and later through institutional racism, boarding schools, and things of that sort. So I kind of wanted to go back to the map here to show a little bit about the migration pattern. So if you guys, for another resource, I found that, and I've used this as a teacher for tribal history, that the migration patterns or the map that's shown for the Mandan, Hidatsa, and Arikara are pretty similar, that match up with some of our creation stories. So the Hidatsa, they say that we come from the east, and so this kind of verifies that in with some hard like scientific evidence, archaeology, with historical linguistics, and so us coming from this area and then slowly making our way up north and west into what is now the state of North Dakota. And so the next page, or the next slide, I just created this graphic real quick. These are only a few of the name places in Hidatsa that I want to point out. And then I didn't want to really include, current state, like county line boundaries or anything, because that's not really how we dealt with our land, the land, way back when. And so if you noticed, let's see, a lot of our villages are along the waterways. And so for several reasons, to be close to, natural resources. And so I wanted to start out with, so this would be the Hidatsa territory is Hidatsa Idawadi, the Hidatsa land, or the Hidatsa homeland. And so Awati Itiash is kind of what we know as the Missouri River. And so we have stories that connect us to the Missouri River. And then if you guys can guess what these towns are now, Midahatsi Arawagush, where the willows grow, which is our word for Bismarck, present day Bismarck. Awadi Batsihesh, which is for Mandan. So Batsihe is slanted. So it's referring to the slanted village down by Mandan. And so there's a story, I think it's in the Captain Walsh papers, where Awadi Batsihesh was actually a Hidatsa village before the Hidatsa went up, before this specific group of Hidatsa went up to join to Awati Gilchush. And so Na the Ashish, the Heart River, which let's see, I believe Double Ditch, those villages in that area. So the place where Stanton is at now, Awati Gilchush, it refers to the 5 villages. So the 3 Hidatsa ones that are there, and then also later the 2, especially after the smallpox epidemic of the late 1700s, they made it 5. So Awati Gilchush refers to that area. And then of course each village had their own individual name as well. So Metsi Ashish is, where the Knife River, where the villages are at now, as you guys probably are aware. So then let's see, I'm just going to kind of go up. Midigiba Dagish, our word for the Garrison Dam. So I know a lot of people now, it's the dam and then Lake Skakawea. But this is the Hidatsa word that we call the Garrison Dam. It means closed waters, and that as you can probably see, midi, our word for water. So midigiba dagish. Over here, awatigashash. So we have the big Missouri, or the big river, and then the little one, awatigashash. I wanted to also talk about Midi Khobash. I think this is the only one. No, there's 2 places left on my little map here. So Midi Khobash is sacred waters, and that's also, I'm pretty much just going over the basics, the gist of some of the places and stories here. So Midi Khobash is actually Devil's Lake, where the Spirit Lake Dakota people are now. So they too also came from the east. And this is also where one of our creation stories was said to have occurred. So we came from the waters of that. And then one of our names for our people is Awa Agaru Nukhbaga, meaning the above ground people. And so the story, it's not storytelling time as of yet. So those of you might already know the story of how we came up above the water. So that's how we refer to I'm pretty sure that's kind of the band of what the Hidatsa probably call themselves, Awa Agaru Nukhbaga. And so going back down to Midahatsi Arawagush, Midahatsi is also what we called ourselves. So Hidatsa is supposed to come from that word Midahatsi Hishi, meaning red willows. And so if you ever noticed, if you're along even anywhere, I noticed in my Mandarin in Newtown too, on for Berthold and up north a little bit more. But if you guys are walking and you guys see the little red willows, the little bushes that they usually don't have leaves until the spring or summer, then they kind of get they kind of die out for the season, but they look red. So those are the red willows. And that's the name for that's another name for the Hidatsa. So eventually we all met at Awatigichush. The sounds in Hidatsa. So there's pretty much, except for, there's this thing called the guttural. And except for the guttural, Hidatsa has a lot of sounds that English does, but some just occur more frequently. So we're just more used to saying them in Hidatsa versus English and vice versa. So like long, short vowels, ooh, ooh. We have those in English and as well as in Hidatsa. And so also sounds like sh. And so that's a lot of sounds that are that occur more frequently in Hidatsa. So the guttural sound means simply, it just means it comes from the throat. So our words for some examples are khuba, which if you remember me saying khubash, to be sacred or holy, khuba. So when I used to teach my youngins in Mandarin, I would have them say, get some spit in your mouth, hold it at the back, and then say the, and we'd practice that before we start a lesson. And so another word would be gichu. So that's just the word Awatigichush, the 5 villages. So it's our word for the number 5. And another example, gukhti, means to help. Gukhtit, he helped. So except for that, there's very little Hidatsa phonetically. Phonetically meaning the sounds. It's not difficult. It's not too complicated. And then this is what gives, languages, not just Hidatsa, but Mandan, Arikara, all Lakota, all of our languages, they're unique, different, like, prosody, like they're different sounds. Each language kind of has like a little rhythm to it and its own type of sound by itself. So I really like learning about that too. And so some verbs, I wanted to cover verbs, nudi, so to eat. And I know some of the kids would laugh at that one when I say that one. So nudi, diria, to run. Udzi, to be thirsty. It also means dry, so that makes sense, right? Udzi, aridi, to be hungry. Aridi, igigu, to hear or listen. Eke, to know. So either a person or something. Haku, to live. So hakuads, mahakuads, I am living. Or you can use it as Bismarck mahakuads. If I'm saying it in English, Bismarck mahakuads, I live in Bismarck. So that was part of my introduction. So the next thing I want to talk about was pretty much just putting these together. So there's the verb root, which is, so for example, my first word was nudi, so the verb root, nuded. So that's a sentence. And then if you guys can, one of the things that I'm learning about as a graduate student at University of Arizona is in linguistics is how to identify, even if you don't know the language, and this would actually help, people who are trying to learn their language again and others who are studying, specific languages, how can we break it down by using linguistics, without really knowing the language. And so, eventually you get to know the language. So nudi, nuded. And so what would the the mean? That's kind of being able to break that down. So nudi, if you guys remember what nudi meant, which was to eat. The simplest conjugation, you're just taking the main verb root and you're making it into a sentence. So like we usually don't say eat, right? We don't, if I'm asking somebody if they ate or I'm talking about eating, I just don't say eat. We say, did you eat? I ate. Did you eat? Are you hungry? Not just hungry. So just kind of changing it just a little bit to make it into a conversation is pretty much what conjugation is. So that's what I mean when I talk about that. So nudi, the verb nuded. This would be what we call the third person. So a third person singular. It would be me talking about, the lady in the picture, somebody I may or may not know, but she's just, her. And so nuded, if you guys weren't aware, there is not really, so this is different from Mandan and Lakota especially, where we don't really attach gender too much. The only are like, I think they call them gendered verbs. So like, it doesn't matter if it's a man or woman speaking. So this kind of helps me. It's a little bit easier. This is only one aspect that makes it a little bit easier to learn. So like Mandan, it depends on if you are a man or woman speaking to a man or woman, speaking to more than one man or woman, so it gets kind of complicated. I like the Hidatsas a little bit different. So that makes it easier for me. So nuded can be he or she ate. So I also have a Filipino friend. He told me that there is no gender. So like it's they don't say he or she. So it's the same thing in Hidatsa. So for a comparison there. So nudeds, he or she ate. Mia nudeds. Mia meaning woman. So it could be Mia nudeds, the woman she ate, or the woman's eating. So that is one example of one of the verbs broken down. Another one is igigu. So igigu means you're listening, and pretty much the same way. A lot of our verb roots end in vowels. So a, e, I, o, u, kind of like Spanish vowels. So it's another way that Hidatsa is pretty pretty easy. And so I tell a lot of people, don't be intimidated by, the how it is. Of course, we kind of need a framework to work with. So this is how I lay it out pretty much for anybody who's just trying to learn Hidatsa or wants to learn more Hidatsa. And so ikigu, ikiguds, or be ikiguds. So if you ever notice what the z, so that would be a suffix. It has a meaning to it, right? It changes the word. So igiguds, he or she is listening. Magristawadze igiguds. So we have the boy is listening, and I have a picture of a little boy, and his hands to his ear, and he's, you know, trying to listen. So if I'm asking somebody, nigigu, I can also kind of use it as a command to nigigu, you listen, nigigu. That's the next part I'll get to with a question. Oh, okay. So I'm gonna give it 5 more minutes. So I'll talk about this a little bit, and if there's any questions, I think the chat would work for questions. So, but yeah, igigo, or yeah, igigo, to listen. So ma garishtawa ze igiguds. The boy's listening. And so to turn this into a question, there's this thing called the glottal, and pretty much it's for a good example. So in English, pretty much the only glottal that we use is uh-oh. There's a little space between there. We put, you know, it's supposed to be part of the same word or same, you know, phrase, but it's just, it has that little space that we put in there, a little breathy space. And so in Hidatsa, that's how we turn things into a question. English, it's an inflection, as in, do you know if I'm asking a question? And so in Hidatsa, it's igigu, and we add our prefix on there for ni. So the good thing too, the n, ni or na, it also refers to like you. So if I'm asking you, somebody a question, nigigu, are you listening? Nigigu, you listen. So let's see. For hungry, I put, so a little bit of conjugation happens. So nudi, narudi. Naru, did you eat? Narudi, did you eat? So these little differences, once you get them down, it kind of makes Hidatsa, say English, Hidatsa a little bit easier. So pretty much what I'll tell people is just patterns. I would definitely like to, I can answer to the best of my ability. I'm not sure if you guys can see, if you guys have any questions, I think I'll put my email in the chat. Pretty much I'm maybe one of the organizers can pass this along to, because it says I can only send to organizers and panelists. So it's Lisa, Lisa dot casarez@gmail.com. And so if you have any other questions or anything that I talked about today, feel free to shoot me an email. I can kind of elaborate on some of the things I had talked about, more about the language. Yeah, pretty much anything about language I like to talk about. I can talk to you about the stuff I'm learning. So yeah, my goal ultimately is to, you know, pretty much revitalize Hidatsa, start an immersion school and bring back, you know, start producing more first language fluent speakers again. So hopefully we can do that before the last of our fluent speakers, first language fluent speakers, pass away. So for me, that's kind of my mission in life right now. So I want to thank everybody. Thank you. Sorry about the difficulties again. And go it. Odds get odds.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Jeed, did you wake on okay, and my name is Loren Yellowbird. I said my Indian name, Arikara, was medicine horse. It's good to be here to talk to you guys today. So I know it's kind of a really important thing, these language summits. I know that there's a number of us that always try to make these things happen. So I think it's important for us to try to sit down and go over some of this information, talk about it, and try to understand where we go with our learning. And to kind of give you a background on my own end of it, well, right now I'm a park ranger at Fort Union Trading Post. I did work at the Knife River Indian Villages as well. I worked there for about 3 years. But when I started working there, that was back in the 90s, my interest in the language and all that was starting to peak at that time. And anything beyond that, I really didn't have you know, I grew up in White Shield, North Dakota, and over as a kid growing up, I would hear the language spoken periodically. My mother was a very strong advocate in terms of trying to teach us. She's not a fluent speaker, but she would try to teach us words, phrases, just certain simple things so we would understand that. And I know my father was a fluent speaker, but he never spoke that much to us. He was a very quiet man. So over the years, I continued to go through life and all that, and heard many things about our people, the Arikara and Hidatsa, the three tribes, of course. But I grew up in the part of it to be in the Arikara part of it, and over the years, I got to see a lot of different things go on, and at some point, I felt I didn't really want to have anything to do with the language. I think this is important to say because it reaches into some of our young people and what they think about and what makes them feel what is important to them. And growing up, I mean, I like playing sports. I ran, I played basketball, I did a bunch of different things, but would go to powwows and stuff like that. But what I remembered is, over time, I didn't want to identify with the native culture or any of that stuff because I'll just reach back into that time period. There was a lot of racism, and as you see it now, we still have it. And sometimes it would make me want to not identify my own name. Talking to different people and whatnot, especially off the reservation. You interact with people and they ask you, "What's your name?" And say Loren, that was it. I didn't tell them Yellowbird. I didn't want them to think any less of me, So you kind of go through those times like that as a person that experiences these things, and over time, like I said, before I start working at Knife River, later in between that, I went away to boarding school. I went to Shamawa, Wahpeton and Shamawa. Moved back and came back to the reservation, back and forth. Eventually, I joined the military, and finally got to the point where, I started having my own little life going on and met a gal, all that type of stuff, and got married and was trying to make a life. And one thing I didn't want to do was move back home. I said, because of my own thinking was, there's nothing there. There's nothing there. There was just people drank, what I remembered, and there was no jobs. There was no pride in my own thinking and my own community and my own people. But I ended up having to do that. I had to humble myself to come back into that world and step into it. And it was just one way I had to survive. And as I did that, I remember going through the motions of everything too. And at one point, I remember helping out one of my relatives, and he was visiting me. And at one point, he started singing me these songs, the songs that belong to our tribe, or at least these were veteran songs. He started singing to me. And one of them was, he sang, because he was in the Army, he's my, extended uncle. He's like, well, I was in the Army, so he sang this Army song. And as he did that, then he said, your dad, he talked about my dad and said he was a Navy, World War II veteran. So then he sang the Navy song, and I just got out of the Navy, active duty, and I was in the reserves, and, that triggered something in my head. And as that happened, I remember thinking about that later on. And at one point, I remember talking to this guy that came into, my parents ran a store there. And so this guy came in. And as he came in, he wanted to get some cigarettes. And their family had a little, what do you call it, a tab there. So they would charge stuff and all that. And so he wanted to get some, and he just pointed at the cigarettes, and he went like this. And so I told him, I said, oh, okay, well, Terry, I said, you're your wife called and said that you guys have to get a hold of her, let her know what you're getting so she can keep track of the bills, you know. And so he said, oh, okay, all right. And he said, well, I'll come back. Then what triggered it for me was looking at him and remembering, just for whatever reason, when my grandma passed away, and like I said, I was so distant from all the culture and history and language and stuff. I remember these men getting up and saying that, you know, my grandma, they respected her and all that. And this one old man got up. He couldn't speak very well. He had an oxygen tank and stuff. But he was saying that he was one of the oldest men in the community and that he would sing. He wanted to do this because this, you know, so he kept trying to sing, but he, like I said, he had a hard time talking and breathing. And so I started singing, and that whole group of them sang, and it was our kind of our farewell song. And we always do that. We always do that, I know. And I didn't know much about that, but I knew that's what they did. And as I looked at Terry, I remember at that time when he was trying to get the cigarettes, he was the last one alive of all those men. And so I asked him, I said, hey, I said, I'll get you a pack of cigarettes if you record a song for me. And he looked at me and said, well, what song is that? And I said, the Navy song, because, you know, in my mind, I was a veteran for the US Navy, and I thought that would be pretty cool to have. And he said, oh, okay, yeah, I could do that. He said, then I'll put all these songs on there, these veteran songs. And so we have one for each branch, that type of thing. And then the flag song, he said, I'll put that on there too. He said, I'll even put your grandpa's song on there. You know, and I didn't even know my grandpa had a song. You know, I never met my grandpa. He died in 1939, I guess. He was trying to save some young people. The story was that, you know, when the Missouri freezes over and all that, was down by Nishu. If any of you know what, like Lisa was talking about, these sites, you know, this area called Nishu was where they were at. And these boys went down to the river to play on the ice, and it was breaking up in the spring. They said these old people were watching them, and then they fell through. And then my grandpa he was driving by, and then they flagged him down. These people couldn't speak English, and they wanted him to go over and help. And so he did the best he could, but he lost his life trying to save others. That's all I ever knew of him. And so I was pretty excited. I was like, wow, okay, sure. I'll be anxious to learn this song. And so he said, okay, I'll put that all on tape for you and everything. He said, so if I do that, give me another pack of cigarettes. So I kind of went, oh, all right, you know. So I gave him another pack, and down the line, sure enough, he brought a tape over. And after that, I start listening to him, and all of that negative thoughts start going away. You know, the idea of me not wanting to identify with the language and culture and all that. I start remembering my own people and what that means to us, because like the 3 tribes, you know, we're all a small group, and we are fighting to maintain our language specifically and the culture. And this was important to them to have this stuff carry on. And so I looked at that, and I start working at that. But what comes with those songs are words too. And that opened up that doorway for the language. As you heard me speak earlier, you know, I had some knowledge of language to a small degree growing up with some of it, hearing it. One of them was my mother would talk to us, and we'd all talk to her at one time. And she always says, Pidu. Pidu means quiet, you know, be quiet. Because, you know, you get a bunch of little kids and they're all talking at once, you know. And then so she said, Pidu, you know, she wanted to either have us be quiet or let's have one of us talk one at a time, that type of thing. Or Shuktegao, Shuhtegawa, shut the door, you know. So these were little moments, you know, throughout. We learned a lot of stuff, you know. I learned a lot of things that tied in growing up, you know. Quit being haragals, you know, quit being fighters, you know, because me and my brothers, we little guys would fight over things. And so you start hearing these words that way, you know, and it kind of embeds that idea of identity. And as I grew to be who I was at, you know, I don't know how long that was, you know, 30 years ago, I guess, you know, when I started getting into that part of it, start learning some of these songs and all that, or, you know, 25, 30 years, that part became important. And so when we look at the language and how that ties in, I mean, I had to sit down with these men and say, what's the meaning of this song? How far did it go back, and what is the connection to it? You know, it's fascinating because, you know, in some of these things we have a lot. I mean, all of our tribes all over have a lot of history. And there's one song that we sing, I remember, and as I try to learn the history of it and everything, you know, I asked my my mentor, this Terry, I said, how old's this song? And he said, oh geez, it's really old. And the words are Sinan Achto Dunahe Nahu Gahu Negaki Wawanu. That's those words there. They say, you know, my friends, it's good to dance because we're not here long. You know, we're not on this earth long. And that those same words were fascinating to me because as I became a ranger and historian and all that, I started seeing these words in different journals about these trappers and traders recording our culture, not just Arikara, Hidatsa, Mandan, but for Arikara specifically for me, because that's my interest. And there was one that was dated back July 28th, 1837, the year of the smallpox epidemic. And so putting that together and the idea behind it, I thought, because that journal, that trader had written that information. He didn't write the Arikara, his ability to phonetically write the Arikara language, but he wrote it in English what they were saying, and it was just the same words, you know, in this song. It's kind of a round dance song. And so I thought that was it's amazing to know these things that we have. You know, some of us are fighting hard to keep it going, not just in the classroom, but outside of that too, in our own personal life. And that's a big part of what I've been trying to do. What other things I've tried to do in my life too, as far as working with the Park Service, was try to implement these ideas, because at one point, you know, as we hear our language being endangered, you have you know, groups like, you know, Fort Union and the Knife River Indian villages, and you know, all these different sites. So many of them tell our traditional stories. They talk about us, they talk about our history, our culture, and all that. And it's really a benefit for them to be held accountable by us, to say, you guys should be having us be part of this too, this conversation. And so up at Fort Union, we do a lot of living history. And in the past, I used to bring my sons to the fort, and we dress up with reenactments and stuff. And in those moments, we would sit down and talk, at least use words and all that, so it could be used in communication. So whenever visitors and them came through and seen us, that's what they were seeing. They were seeing the actual language being spoken at a site historically that would have been where it would have been used. And so that's a big part of, you know, when you're looking at promoting the idea of language and its ability to exist outside our own tribe. And I bring that up too because I've lived away from home now a long time, a lot back home from the reservation and stuff. So a lot of my kids have grown up off the reservation, and all my kids are with me and all that. So we go home, we go home for maybe for the powwow or for a family reunion or a funeral, and those are the only things they identify with. And we're not the only ones, we have others throughout the nation here that are part of our tribe, not just the Arikara, but also Hidatsa, Mandan, and every other tribe that's, as you see, that are living in cities like Denver, like Minneapolis, Bismarck even, all these different places. And they grow up in that world, and it's hard for them to exist, with that part of it as well. And knowing that there are people that are working hard to try to keep that viable for them at some point when they have a chance to want to reach out and learn about this. It'll be there, and that's, I commend all the people that work on the language, of the book writing, the computer apps. I know there's apps out there. There's a ton of information. And we got linguists working with our people all the time. And some of us that teach or at least work on the language, it's important too. And it kind of didn't click for me until a little bit later, because I don't know if some people know, but I've worked on I worked on a big budget film with Leonardo DiCaprio, and he was a hard worker. He wanted to know everything he would say and all that. And I had to work with all the actors and all these people. And it's kind of interesting because you see the dedication into the wanting to be able to say some things right. And they had a hard time saying some of the words. So I would fix it to the point where it would be at least connected to that specific idea that they were speaking. And it was really good to hear that, because I got a lot of feedback afterwards. I had people that have passed away now call me up at my home, or seeing, and said, geez, what we heard and all that was really good. We appreciate that work on it. And what clicked for me on this too was like, reaching out into the mainstream again too. We have, again, our people that are at different places, some of these urban areas and stuff like that, that won't ever get a chance to know any of this stuff. But yet here it is, they're seeing it on a big screen with names like that. And that could trigger that for somebody. When I look back at my own points of being triggered to be able to want to know the language and speak it, know the songs. I guess I was more about wanting to know that stuff that we don't want to have that's lost. It's not just the language, it's the songs, it's the culture, and language is all part of that. It's interchange, it's tied into it. So that is part of that connection for me. But I don't know if everybody knows our history as a people, the Arikara, but my dad always told me we came from the South. And what I do know is our language is similar to the Pawnee. And so the Pawnee and us have a relationship. And we've been meeting with them periodically, almost annually, except for last year and this year now because of the pandemic. But we'd get together with them and have trying to revitalize a cultural relationship and share, a number of different things. We have people who are, it just seems like there's kind of a growing thing where people are building earth lodges back home, and I'm seeing a lot of that. I didn't even know how to, how to say that, but then after I learned, it was Akanana Tau, earth lodge, Arikara earth lodge, Sahnish Akanana Tau, our home. And you start seeing these things coming to be. So there are opportunities for us at places that we can do these things too. But it's great to see the pride coming out, and at least the effort that a number of people are doing. And yeah, the language between us and the Pawnee are pretty similar, I think. that was a challenge there, because I know some people said, well, this language isn't interchangeable or all that. But, you know, historically, you know, that there were these contacts that these tribes together would speak. They had lived together, you know, and they said that with the Crow and Hidatsa as well. But as far as the Arikara and Pawnee, you know, we did live with each other for one time, and it was said that we came together, you know, or we branched out from each other. And for me, my first experience in speaking to a Pawnee was when I was going to the community college in Newtown. We went to this thing called AHEC, and I remember I was in an elevator, and these guys standing behind me, and there was three of us standing there, and one of the jackets that we had on that said White Child Home of the Arikara. So one of these guys says to me, are you guys Arikara? And I said, yeah. And he says, oh, he says, and I'm Pawnee. So he reached his hand out and said, Nawa, which, yeah, that's hello. And so I said, oh, Nawa. I know back home we've been saying Nawa, and the men would say Jeed. So there was some difference in terms of that. But I know we still use that word today, Nawa, from a greeting as well as an ending of a talk. So, or a prayer or whatever it might be. So these are part of these words that are interchangeable.
Loren, there's a question. How did the song get into translation?
Well, as far as when you're talking about the fur trapper guy or the trader, these guys were working with a number of these tribes. I mean, one of them was actually married to a Mandan woman. This other guy had interactions with Arikara as well. I mean, this was all done at Fort Clark, and so there was plenty of them that were able to go interact and talk. It's even said that one of our, a number of our chiefs were fluent in at least 5 to 6 different languages, and so that kind of sends a point of where this would break down. And like I said, see none. These guys were telling them now, see none, friends, then achto dunahe, that's good. It's good. Achto dunahe nahu gahu, and that means to like the round dance. And that it's good, and when you read the journal, that's the guy, he's making that reference. So specifically to get that to the point of where this trader had this conversation with an Arikara, or at least an interpreter, to say, what is this guy saying? That part I don't know, because it's not specific to that point, but to know that he translated that point saying this is what he's saying, and it's kind of fascinating, because it's in Chardon's journal for any of you who are kind of into the history part of it. Like I said, and when you look at July 28th, 37, that's the date that was. I mean, that sticks in my mind. That's how far that is for me to understand that. So that part of it, knowing, these ideas are continuing on, and the music's huge in all of our languages and all of our tribes. So that part of it is never, that I don't want to minimize that, because it definitely is a big part of us being able to revitalize language as well.
Wind Spirit Spotted Bear, she's going to be speaking on the Nueta language, Mandan language. Thank you for joining us on the call today, and the floor is yours.
Oh, Akhtani Shish. Dashkani Dosha. Mirase Idukhisha. Eherosh. Hello everyone, how are you all doing? My name is Wind Spirit Spotted Bear. So what I said was Dashkani Dosha, that is how in the Nueta language we address everyone. So because there's a mixture of male and female, I am addressing all of you as to not disrespect anybody. And I said, Mira se iduchi she eherosh. I'm telling you, my name is Wind Spirit, and that is me addressing a group of people with the ending. So I wanted to start off today with just a little background on the Nueta. Today that is what we're known as, and a little bit about where I come from and how I came to study the Nueta language. So a few years ago, my older brother, first under Corey Spotted Bear, started teaching the Nueta language while he worked and coincided with one of our last fluent speakers, who is Edwin Benson, the late Edwin Benson, Dr. Edwin Benson. And we sat down with Edwin several times throughout these past, 10, 15 years, and we were able to document and unfold a lot of the language, especially today's language, and we were able to create CDs and Mandan phrase books, both with the phrases and others that were basically basic Mandan, just so we could get started on preserving the language. The Mandan claimed to have been divided into bands, which in a large part were broken down while living at the Heart River. Before that, there was considered to have 13 clans within the Mandan people, and since the 1950s, only 4 of those had been reported as still in existence, and then now today we only have the Nuptari and at the time they used to call it the Nuetari. So that was another band, which today is the Nuetari, is the Nueta. As you notice if you study the language, a lot of it, the dialect really changed over the years. And I think it was so that we could better understand it. Our language was never a written language. We were always a verbal speaking tribe. There were the Istope, also known as those who tattooed themselves. There was the Nuptari, which I believe the family that I know that today still kind of speaks that language are the Crowsheart family. And then there was but it doesn't really have a meaning. And then there's the Mananare, which is those who quarreled. And then there's the Awihaka, which is the Uikaha, sorry. It doesn't have a meaning, but then there's the Nuetari, which is our people, which Nueta today, that's the language that I learned. I started off, I grew up in Mandaree in Tumbuta area, and I started speaking Hidatsa. That was kind of my second language. I didn't start speaking the Nueta language until I was about 16, 17 years old. And a big part of that is to my older brother, Corey, who, as I said, when he came back to live in Twin Buttes community after going out and getting his degree and studying the language, and he started the Nueta language initiative, and that initiative had grown over the past several years. And in 2015, I came on board as not just a coordinator, but also as somebody who wanted to help to preserve the language, whether that be, creating materials, creating songs, or, just trying to help in any way I can, because I realized that this language was, in a sense, endangered. And I started to look more into it. I got more involved with that side of my heritage. I grew up just really knowing Hidatsa, but I was so thankful that I had this opportunity to sit down with Edwin and sit down with other speakers, Valerian Three Irons, Alice Benson, Edwin Benson, and a few others who really spoke the language quite well. There was a really sad moment in my life when Edwin had passed away, because he was one of our last fluent speakers. And he told me one time how he was really sad in his older years because he didn't have anybody to speak the Nueta language with anymore. And it sometimes made him sad because he missed being able to speak fluently and converse with others. And he knew a lot of languages as well. He knew how to speak some Arikara, some Lakota, some Hidatsa. And he was really a role model, just a just a pillar in our community, in the Tumbuts community. And he was just somebody I really looked up to. And so I made a promise to myself that I would do the best I could to help to preserve this language. So I'm still learning, and I'm really young. I'm young in this language. I try to teach the younger generation as best I can. I teach my daughter, you know, my nieces and nephews. I try to speak to some elders that I know still might know the language, just so it's a respectful way of using it, but it's also helping me to continue to preserve it. And so we do language camps, culture camps, workshops, and I'm also, as of this past Tuesday, I was hired on at the Nueta, or at the Nueta, Hidatsa, and Sahnish College as the Mandan 1 language teacher. And so that is, you know, in my belief, it's a way of being able to preserve this language. And so, as I said today, the reason we're preserving the Nueta language is because it's the one that is considered most spoken, or I guess it's just one that was picked up, and we had the speakers to help us document that language. And I've worked in the past several years with linguists, and one of the main linguists I worked with was Indrik Park from Estonia, and he's really helped the Nueta Language Initiative to come together, create materials and phrase books, and he's helped me in times when a way that I like to preserve the language is through song. And since I was a little girl, I loved to make up my own, compose my own songs, you know, whether they were round dance songs or prayer songs or garden songs or love songs. And I studied in a lot of different books. One of them being the Mandan Social and Ceremonial Organization that Alfred Bowers had helped or had written. So I suggest that's a book I suggest a lot of you, if you really want to know more about the clans, the bands, the social and ceremony organization of the Mandan people. That is a book that I highly suggest you look at. So while living in, I'm going to just read something here. While living in the Heart River region, the dialect differences also existed between bands. 3 major dialect groups existed then, according to Crowsheart and Scattercorn. And Crowsheart, he was Nuptari. And Nuptari, Nuetari, which is today Nueta that we know it as, and the Awikafa. The latter group was small and was assimilated into the Nuetari after the first smallpox epidemic, and linguist differences between the Nuptari and Nuetari were recognized by Maximilian, who prepared a partial list of Mandan words of the 2 dialects. And from that is how we were able to gather and continue speaking these languages and preserving them. The differences are still recognized by Mandan informants. The Nuetari was the largest linguist group. The Istopa and the Mananaret, the latter 2 bands, separated from the Nuptari proper for economic reasons when the village population became too large for their further exploitation of what they were at the time of the corn grounds. So with that, I just want to, you know, I don't want to take up too much time just explaining. I just wanted to give you a little overview of the dialects and of the clans, and let you know that Nueta does stem from more than, they stem from a broader clan system. But because the Nueta are one of the main ones preserved today, we are able to continue to try to create words and continue to try to carry on the language. And I was listening to Lisa speak earlier about how she was kind of happy that the Hidatsa language wasn't like the Arikara or like the Nueta, because how we speak in Nueta is going to differentiate between male, female, a group of males, a group of females, or just a group in general of mixed people. So if I'm going to speak to a male, a lot of times you're ending when you're addressing, like if you're asking a question. So when I started off saying, like, you know, how are you all doing? I said, Dashkani dosha. and that's plural when I put sha at the end, but I say nito sha. So when we put nito in any of our phrases, that emphasizes that we are speaking to more than one person, but the ending nito sha emphasizes that we're speaking to a group of mixed people or a group of males. But if I change that ending to na and I say dashka nito na, na, that is addressing a group of females only. So the differentiation, the difference there is when I'm addressing a male or a group of males or just a mixed group, I am saying sha, nito sha at the end. And if I'm addressing more than one female, I say nito na. But if I'm addressing one male, then it's dushka sha. I don't put nito in there, so it doesn't make it plural. If I'm addressing one female, I'm saying dashka na. Again, I don't put nito in there. So again, it doesn't make it plural. And then I'm going to come over to our commands. So you have singular and plural when it comes to speaking in the Nueta language. You have direct conversations with either a male or a female. And I think that was one of the reasons why it was so hard to preserve a lot of the languages, was because even though the dialects weren't so different, they required a specific way of speaking. So it was either with the statements, the questions, the commands, it was always speaking to a male, a female, a group of males, a group of females, or a group of mixed people. And that's something I always try to stress, especially to my students, is just be careful how you address others when you're speaking. Because as of recently, when I first started speaking, I was always saying like ete sha or ehero sha or epecto. So I was always talking as if I was addressing a male until Edwin corrected me and said, when you speak to me, you speak to a male, but when you speak to my daughters, because I'd address his daughters that way. And so in a sense, I felt embarrassed. I was thinking, oh geez, I thought I knew, but apparently I didn't. And so I was really thankful that he corrected me. And since then, I've been very careful of how I address males and females or groups. So for instance, if I'm going to tell somebody, like if I'm going to speak to a male and I say it, I'm going to say eheta, I'm saying say it. If I'm speaking to a female, then I'm saying ehena. If I'm speaking to a group of males, I'm putting that ni in there again. So it's making it plural. So I say ehenista, and that's to a group of males or a group of mixed people. If I'm speaking to just a group of females, it's ehenitana. And then, so if you're addressing more than one male, when you're doing a command rather than a question, it's nista. If you're addressing more than one female, it's nitana. The plural suffixes that are pronounced inista or initana, whenever the verb stem ends in one of the consonants, like P, T, K, S, SH, X, or H, and the male form of the word is used when addressing a group of both males and females. And it's really, I know it's probably hard to, absorb, but it is really a tough language to learn. Nonetheless, it's a very tough language to teach, but I'm determined to keep it, to preserve it.
We do have one question. It's from Alice Hart, and she would like to know the name of the book that you had mentioned and get the information.
Okay, so it's the Mandan Social and Ceremonial Organization, and it's by Alfred W. Bowers. and it's the Bison Books Publishing, and it's just I know there's a Arikara and a Hidatsa book like this as well, but this one's the Mandan Social and Ceremonial Organization.
Perfect. So our next question is, how do you say corn, squash, and sunflower?
Corn, squash, and sunflower. So the three sisters. Let's see if I remember that. I had that written down. That's something that I was actually just learning as well. Iwaki hachikosh just means I forget, or sometimes I forget. Let's see. Okay, so corn, chojate. It's similar to like ojadi, you know, with Hidatsa. We say gojate, like our K's make a G sound, and that's corn, gojate. Beans, omnik, and then squash is goore. When you want to say the three sisters, or it is the three sisters, so if you say the three sisters, it's gikutaka inamini, and then you would say it is the three sisters, gikutaka inaminish. So you're making a statement there. One thing I like to say all the time is it's Wagikia ame wagaheresh hape iunsta tatechie nishinasha tokani, and then it says numakaki ame waonatkoshi kara magahanista. So I'm saying I'm praying for all of you. May Creator keep us in good hands in days to come, and everybody be happy and kind in your minds and in your hearts.
No, wow, thank you. Well, thank you, Wind Spirit. That was Wind Spirit Spotted Bear for speaking and teaching us about the Mandan language.
Washira haranito. Omni hash.
So our next presenters are going to be Lanny Realbird and Harry Sitting Bear. And before we get to them, we are going to hear from the Mandan Hidatsa Arikara Nation Language Department just to talk a little bit about what they're doing and the initiatives that they are pushing forward. And Amber Gwin will be speaking for them.
Marishi Hishuanakabagish, many Girishats, hopefully you can all hear me out there. I'm a Hidatsa language apprentice back home, and different things that we've been doing lately is working with different languages. We recently partnered with the All Chief Society out of the Nueta Hidatsa Sahnish College, and we helped with graduation games where we had different language events just to try to get our people involved again, because there's a lot of interest, but there's not a lot of people actually speaking and trying to take part in the language. And for us, that's one big concern for us, is to try to get people speaking a whole lot more. And but mainly in our department, we have master and apprentices in all three languages, Mandan and Hidatsa. And we kind of been doing different Zooms because of pandemic and stuff like that. We've been having different languages where we meet with some of our Arikara people, and we've been teaching some of like the Hidatsa people classes, and hopefully it'll give us guys as apprentices to teach with some of the Arikara people later down the road, so we can hopefully become teachers somewhere eventually. We don't know exactly where it's headed at. The pandemic hit us pretty hard, and before that we're only about a year old, and now we're going into our second year, but we're just doing what we can, and hopefully y'all keep your interest in the language no matter your race, creed, or color.
Thank you, Amber. So we are going to be going to Lanny and Harry.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Raga bukara postajam. You know what Bajay Birg. Bijawake Samivuk. Raga Ragara Kukara Hina Agur Baga Malao. Dera Big ba pat to ko wiju wek samewa balosha amira tharto amahirachis who week, otherwise known as Lanny Realbird. Be up Saroguk, Data, up Pabi, up Novazak. I'm also a member of the Arikara Nation and the MHA Nation as well. I'm currently residing in Crow Agency, Montana, and I'm serving as a language advocate for a number of native tribes, and I'm very honored to say that I'm working with my people today. We've previously done a few projects, like, for example, in this very sacred building, this very humble place, an earth lodge, we get the opportunity to express ourselves. And this afternoon, on this beautiful day in this Knife River Valley, we have this great chance to let the world know that we are still here. We are still conducting projects. We are still teaching. We're still learning. We're still interacting. We're still praying. We're still instructing. And that's what we are going to talk about today. Like I said, I'm very honored. My friend over here, off camera there, Elijah Benson, we had done some work, fine-tuning some video in the Mandan language. Also, like we said, Miss Gwin also had a nice introduction on the efforts of the Hidatsa language program, including the other respective nations that's going on. We also did a presentation last year, and we were visitors again. And I'm glad today, I'm very honored to be a guest of my niece here. I say that because my brother, Byron Youngbird, we took each other as brothers a long time ago, and that's biologically, she's his niece. But the thing I want to say today is that I'm very proud as a member of the MHA Nation to say that one of our women folks is the head superintendent of a National Park Service organization, agency. And she is one of the first of any women representing the MHA, or even probably in the state of North Dakota, or even this region, in many of the tribes, that she's one of the first. And we're very proud and honored to be her guest, to do the best we can to showcase and to let people know that our languages are alive. I also want to mention Justin Deegan, her husband, who also we've collaborated on some projects, basically showcasing some dialogue of the Plains Indian Sign Language for the purpose of the tourism department over there on the MHA Nation. At this time, I'd just like to introduce my son here, Harry Sitting Bear, and I'm going to allow him to express himself and let you know who he is. And he's a Marine veteran. He's also an educator, an elder, respected elder among all our nations, as well as the Lakota people. Balaga.
Madojazi Meads. Hello there, my name is Sitting Bear. My dad is the late Jim Smith. His name was Mabaish, and his dad was Betis Kazadish, Alan Smith. I come from my dad's a water buster, and I'm a knife clan. I'm married, and I have children. I have grandchildren, and we've been married now, this coming December, 38 years this time. We were married before, but I was kind of too rowdy, I guess. But she gave me a chance, and now we're doing it again, and it's going good. I'm going to say something about our language and our culture and our customs. This language is really, really important, but also included into this language is our relationship to each other and the earth, our kinship to each other by clan or by blood. And those traditions and that customs that we have, those are part of our lineage, our heritage, and we need to respect those and keep those going. Elijah's my little grandson, Amber's my granddaughter, and I had taken Lanny as my little dad because I lost my dad. Lanny was good friends with late Malcolm Wolf. So I asked him to take his place, and he said yes. So what we're going to try to do today is do a little bit of presentations for all of you. But briefly on some of the efforts that we're doing outside of this is we're trying to present these type of programming, not just to Forebear segment where I'm from, but also to the other segments, the other schools. And we've been called upon by the chairman's office to present at the Recovery Center down in Bismarck. We would like to work with also the Justice Center in Newtown and any of the recovery places that are available that want us to come in and help. As I said, language is important, but there's other parts of this. That's what makes you strong. That's what ties everything together. So if you have any questions at all, feel free to contact me at the Forebear segment, or you can contact me at my Yahoo address, mandanmarine@yahoo, and I'd be more than willing to field any questions that I can try to answer for you.
Oui, c'est good. Like Nakbitewak, Shayjish Cook, we have this project that we had presented to the MHA Nation, and it was basically to teach vocabulary using the complements of sign language. And we were teaching some classes in Newtown. In Iris's class, we presented in Charlie Moran's, as well as a few times in Partial, and our intentions were to move on to Mandaree and on to Twin Buttes to work with Elijah and the folks over there in Twin Buttes, and then possibly come over to Bismarck. And basically, we want to thank the chairman for taking us under his wing and giving us this opportunity to teach the language using the methods that I've developed over the years for language acquisition. It's a complement of not only, you see the presentations in commercial news or maybe in media about Babel. Well, that system is a system that I use in terms of rote, repetitive, as well as an immersion technique of where we use the signs to learn. Like, for example, Harry and I have been doing some short phrases in Hidatsa with the Partial people, as well as Charlie's class. And we start out with this technique. We say, A, introduce the word yes. A. Say that, everybody. A. And then we say, on 3, 1, 2, 3, A. 1, 2, 3, A. And then we move on to another word, and that would be no. And then I introduced the motion of using the hand to push away in a backhanded motion, meaning no, which was known intertribally in this area as the medium for communication. Plains Indian Sign Language was the World Wide Web for the Great Plains, and it stretched all the way from Texas all the way up into Canada, northern Canada. And how we would do that, it would be, okay, Neha, all right? On 3, everybody. Neha, Neha, Neha. Okay, and just to get some confidence, I'm going to just utilize everybody in here to see if they're doing it correct, and also listening and looking to see if they got the sign right. Okay, your turn. 1, 2, 3.
Neha.
All right, very good. And then I put some reinforcement saying, did a good job. Oh, chera. And then we build on a vocabulary. At the time we were basically, we run into a kind of a roadblock, and that's this pandemic. We were teaching some basic phrases of like how they could go across the river, coming across the river to some students in Newtown and Partial, and basically saying, how are you, and having those responses. And then we were moving on from there because we had some, we basically needed to learn more basic words and then develop vocabulary. Well, anyway, here in this region was one of the most, I guess, the hub of commerce, where people bought things, they traded things, they came together for ceremonies. They had lodges like this, where sometimes together they shared the pipe. Sometimes they went over there, along the river there, somewhere they built a sweat like that. They got in together and they prayed for each other. Maybe sometime during the season, when it's cold, or when the leaves are falling off the tree, we'll get together again and we'll pray. Maybe we'll eat. Maybe that thing I promised that I was going to give you, I'll bring it over. It's something that you can wear. Maybe you could use it. It was like, for example, if I was teasing, like I was teasing, like Elijah said, I'm gonna make that goat cape that you're gonna use, and you're gonna dance with it. You're gonna look good. All those women, they're gonna look at you and feel good. But anyway, that teasing goes on too. Like, for example, even sometimes in Crow, we would tease somebody and look at them shoes, man. Holy smokes, man, they're big, you know. Hey, or oh, they stink, you know, or something like that. And here, the people, not only of the MHA Nation, but people from the Nez Perce, the Dakota, the people from the Ojibways, they come over here. They trade. The Crees, they come over here. They trade. The Nakona, the Assiniboines, they come over here. They get together and do those institutions of fellowship and learning and teaching and ceremony and socializing. At that time, that's what they did here. And this was the hub. And over here, you look in this Knife River Valley, Harry and I were just talking, looking at how level it is. And when the floodwaters come of the spring runoff, it would just nourish this area, and all kinds of good crops of going, like that corn growing right here. People dedicate their lives to that, because during the winter time in a place like this, and even we were remarking how ripe the berries are, and I just a few minutes ago, I had some plums there. Man, that was really nice and sweet. So some of our people would get those commodities together, and I'm not talking about commodities of like how, you know, those ones you used to sell. I'm talking about those ones that were part of the agriculture, and we would trade, and we'd have these big collections of corn, and somebody might bring in something like maybe a Dakota might bring in maybe some guns. They might bring in some horses, and we have a lot of agriculture goods that we would trade them, and we would trade, and then they'd get that, we'd get that, and maybe we'd play some games. There's not only nowadays people like to play hand game, but they would also have foot races. Yeah, I could dust you, or my horse is better than yours, and we'll have a 2-hour race, and we'll see whose horse is better, and the winner gets the other one's horse. And there would be things like that. Even the most outrageous things, sometimes they would trade, and there would be relationships formed. People sometimes would come together and bring, even within the same tribe, they'd bring somebody from a different clan and introduce them just to socialize, to get to know that maybe someday that might be somebody's wife, might be somebody's husband. and they get to know each other and know these clans, and they would use sign language with each other across the river, saying, when the sun gets down about that way, there's some chokecherry trees growing over there. When it gets about that time, that's where I'll meet you. And nowadays, you know, if it was like that, like if I was hunting with Elijah or something, and we seen some deer, I said, I seen 3 of them over there. I want you to go around the bluffs over there and then spook them this way, and then I'll get them. I could go out very well, go over there, do that, but I'm going to have you go chase them down. But anyway, that's how we use this. And people know, as well as my son here, being a member of the military, that sign language is really important in the intelligence gathering, as well as the combat, as well as some of the missions that were accomplished. So sometimes we needed that language so that we could interact. Like for example, we were on the bluff, and Elijah and I were on some war party, and I would say, okay, I see 4 of them. They're our enemy. I'm not sure, but I think they could be looking for us. Don't say anything, because they might hear us. What I want you to, what we'll do together is we'll go tell our partners, and we'll come together like that, and we'll form a plan. If it's a plan of attack, or if it's a plan of defense, or if it's just to count coup. And in those days on the plains, we just didn't go in there and maraud and wipe people out. I recently read a book that was describing the coups of the Hidatsa people by A.B. Welsh, was that?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not necessarily eliminating your enemy. There was different tasks of becoming a chief. Basically, if you took that enemy's weapon, if you went in there, into his camp, and you stole his best horse, what that means is that, of course, that's bravery, but the obstacles that you eliminated are basically his defense system. Maybe he has protection. You crossed in front of it. Maybe he has a pipe. You crossed in front of your enemy's pipe. You were more stealth than his medicine. And his dogs, I don't know what kind of dog scent you have, but you were able to get by those dogs. I don't know, something dogs don't like sometimes. You could have, maybe you had it adorned on there when you took that coup from that enemy. That's possible, but that's how our people were. They moved around like that. And sign language, even today, you go into the powwow, somebody will say, oh, go ahead, sing one. Okay, 4 pushes, okay. This person's going to give away. They're going to give away like that. Yeah. One person's got his own song. He's going to sing it pretty soon. Anyway, there was so many aspects of this Plains Indian Sign Language. It's only natural that it is a means for teaching. It's only natural that it's a means to perpetuate, because nobody, I don't see Justin Deegan talking like this all the time. I'm going to go to Bismarck and I'm going to go to Sam's Club. No, I'm going to go to Sam's Club. He's just got motion most of the time, and it's only natural. The other day, I sent an email to some of the tribal members, including Amber, about a system of teaching called Total Physical Response with the apprentice. It was a mentorship method, and the person who was presenting is a well-known language teacher from the University of California, Berkeley. And she said right in basically the introduction that gestures and hand motions are the complement to language learning. And here I've been trying to say that, you know how it is. Us Indians say something like that and our people don't even believe us, And if I was a white person, you know, oh, and I did that, and I had a, you know, I had a suit and tie, and I dressed up, and Elijah would say, "Who in the heck you think you are?" Then they might believe me, but not now. Nowadays, it's getting in Canada. They believe me because I don't know. It's working for them over there on the Pheasant Rump, as well as the Poundmaker Reserve and Mosquito, and over there in what they used to call Hobima. It's working over there. So anyway, this sign language, not only in ceremonial, social, domestic, even like, for example, if Justin and Lisa were cooking, you might say, bring me that salt, you know. Bring 4 chairs. We got some guests coming. Darian's coming. Hey, he eats a lot. Cook extra. They might say that, you know, something like that. So anyway, there's a lot of places where this language fits in, and you see people all constantly. They're always making motions. All we're doing is formalizing it to a system that has already been there. Sign language. Yes, no good. Intertribal, all the way from Texas, all the way to there into high level up there in Alberta. At this time, we're going to do a presentation of a story. We're not going to tell the whole story because it's not that time of the year to tell the story. We're going to tell a number of it, but part of it, but we're going to leave some of the good stuff out. It's like Elijah's probably waiting for where man meets woman or something, and if that story is not like that, it's kind of a different one. But anyway, we're going to showcase the story. Okay. Okay. Okay, this story basically is about, not the full story, again, like I said. It's about the 7 stars of the Big Dipper, as we know. I don't know, Elijah, I don't know if you know, but it's over that way tonight. Anyway, at one time, we called ourselves Miguga. The Hidatsa still call themselves that. And as the crow and because of economics, according to the elders that I used to know around, listen to them in sacred ceremonies and in the mornings, they said, yeah, there's them stories of where some people, the crow and the Hidatsa, separated because the Hidatsas were mad about tripe or something. No, they'll say that about the crow. Or they'll say that the crow have the separation stories of these 2 twins called Red Scalp, as well as No Vitals. Yes, those are there. But another turn on that, I heard this from my late brother, Malcolm Wolf. Leonard Driver was there. At the same time, Esley Thornton was there. We were standing on a hill. It was about 7 in the morning out there in the Shell Creek area. And he said, yes, it's true, those stories they were telling me. They were there. But the main reason, according to the late Leonard Driver, was that these villages were getting so big that in order to hunt, they had to go further and further. So some of these bands, like Achawi, that basically turned into mountain crow, they would have to go a little bit further. So they went up the Yellowstone, or they went up the Missouri, and they got further away. And so they camped, and when they came back, they realized that, oh, we better stay here for the winter. It's much milder. And so sometimes there were ceremonies, there was seasonal, there was a calendar of events that happens in our native worlds, like the winter counts. I think this is almost like one behind me. But there was times for opening medicine bundles. There was time for different pipe ceremonies. There was time to harvest. There was time to hunt, not to hunt. There was times to move. There was times to trade. There was times for games. There was times for teaching, learning, time for certain songs. All of that was our educational system. But back to that time, what he said, Leonard at that time and Malcolm said, you guys had to leave because every time we went out for game, it took a long time to come back because that distance was longer. So the further they went, they decided to stay away, stay over there because they liked it. Come back every now and then. So that's why them guys, as well as my son, say we're still the same people. We just got a different classification because we had to describe that to Western thinkers. Because we're still in this story, it says Migoga, but it's also Biroga. And that's a story. And it was long time ago.
Years ago, our elders told stories on winter nights. There is a time in reference to when the sun turns. The women folk would make berry pudding and fry bread. Even today, we hear these stories yet around the fireplaces of our sweat lodges and ceremonial lodges. Families would invite a storyteller. There would be an exchange, like a dowry. These stories were passed on, and they were given by those that I have to start over again. These stories were passed to those that were chosen with the right. Excuse me. Many still do this. Sometimes we hear these stories many times. Every time we learn more about our people, we would say, hey, to let the storyteller know we are listening. I will tell a small part of this story since it is not that time to do this. Years ago, some buffalo bulls were talking of how they could live forever. We could help the Miroka as they went about. One said, let us be a tree. A brother said, no, trees fall and can be burned up. Others agreed. Then another said, let's be a mountain. His older brother said, that is good, but the bluffs wither away and break apart. These boulders tumble down and break up. Another said, let us be the wind. That is not good. There is the breath of snakes and other bad things. One said, let's be a river. A brother said, that is no good. Sometimes people do not respect the water. They throw trash in there and throw other bad things in there. After pondering this wish, an older one said, let's go up into the heavens and be stars. The others agreed. That is good. We will help the Miroka forever. The other part of the story is about the formation of a pipe in the sky. This is the Big Dipper. At that time, they had a dog travel with them. He watched out for them. One brother said, Let's take him and let him live forever too. If you look closely at the handle of the Big Dipper, there is a double star. Their names are the bull, horns turned forward, thin-haired places in his hide, bull that reaches near bank, crazy bull, brave bull, young white bull. There are people who carry these names. I know of the place where they went, near Billings. They went up near Billings. That is it for now. Forwards.
Hirku keiji, kosta jameg, ikkizapua, ijaway was changed, ikkizapua, humakon koneg, ebije, isapur, konnog, huhu wajavitsu, taka gosta jam, amale walachbag gilk, ina egg, wale ijawe, got a shiagadag. That stories are, it's a long one. There's some other parts in there. There's some details that sometimes like on them winter nights when they invite somebody over and they have some berry pudding or fry bread. Those, it's all right. This time you could use Bluebird, Elijah. Get those ones like hubcaps, man. They're the best. You find them over there at Gallup Flea Market. That's where this story come from. And as I reflect on this invitation, and when I first talked to Darian, came to mind that I wanted to tell a story, and I told Lisa that there's such an abundant amount of stories that can be told. And I was thinking that there is such a legacy here written down, such as we got the story of Long Knife, as well as his partner, Red Beard, and the person who guided them up that big river, the Gagawea. That's just a small part. Even us Crow people, right down the road, not even, but if Elijah and I got on horseback, we'd probably get there in about a half hour or so. The story, our Genesis story of the Hidatsa and Crow near Washburn, the Painted Woods, the genesis of where some arrows were shot down from the heavens that became, one of the stories came where we became people. And at the same time, reflect on another story that was told years ago, and having the opportunity, not maybe over there in Elijah's community of Twin Buttes, there's a shrine there, and there's some rocks there, very much like a medicine wheel. And that was told years ago about the story, and I heard stories before of where a supernatural being who was human, his father was the sun, and his mother took a Hidatsa woman as his wife, and he decided to send that boy down. They didn't quite make it because their rope was not long enough, but that boy lived, and he went on, and being a hero of the Hidatsa and Crow, they called him Kaddish Babide, or Old Woman's Grandson. And those stories, they abound in print as well. And I was just thinking about those stories of the war stories of forebears, as of Sitting Crow, Young Bear, in this very area, in this historic area that those events occurred. But I decided to go in more ancient times of the time of where that just part of that story I told about the 7 stars being buffalo. Okay. At this time, I'm gonna ask Harry to explain some of the instruction that we've been doing in the schools, and then we'll do a few sample entries.
This is basically the beginning lesson that we use to teach. This can be used to teach whether it's Nueta, Hidatsa, or Sahnish. It can be used to teach any language. Lanny uses this when he goes to South Dakota and talks to the Sioux, or he goes to Canada and talks to the Crees, or the Blackfeet up there. So the word will mean the same. You know, the hand gesture will mean the same, but the word will be different. It'll be in that language. And real quick story was, first time I seen this actually happen was when I was a kid. I grew up around some old people, and we were at the old agency in Newtown. And you don't go hang around those old guys. You don't do that. And so I was sitting over here, and my grandfather and another old fellow was sitting over there, and they were telling stories. Jeez, they were telling about how they went and he shot it and got on his horse and went after it. I was sitting over there and I couldn't hear them talking, but I knew what they were saying just by them coming to the house, visiting, and they were telling that story. So you could hear this. The next time that I really seen this happen was in Mandan. We were having a little language symposium. Lanny got up and there were some boys playing outside. He had them come in. There was no training or anything like that. He got them up there, got some time to teach them. In half an hour, we're up to about 35 words with those boys. And they told them, thanked them for their efforts, and we'll try it again later. So they went out to play again. The next day, we're talking, we call those boys in. Lanny did not tell them what to say. He just gave them the sign. And they answered with the sign and the correct word. Now that's overnight. So that's what really got me going on this again. Start thinking that we should use this. So to me, this is it's not something to replace any method that's out there. It's only meant to be another tool that we can use to help us get some of our language back. Our language is one of the key components to our identity, and we need to keep that going. Quick note. They tell those old stories about at the end time, Mabiyahaga, the last days. One of the things they say, they warn us about is your little ones. They're not going to know their language. They're not going to speak their language. At that time, then you know it's time for us, that our time is done. And I don't want to see that happen. So I'm glad to see the language program get started. I'm glad to see that Lanny come over with this. And I'm glad that, we had the opportunity to come here today and reach out and touch people, and hopefully, they'll listen to us and put a bug in the council's ear, and we can go on and do greater things and keep this going for a while. It's not for me, it's for my grandchildren. It's for my great-grandchildren, the ones that aren't even here yet. So that's the ones I'm asking for. So, you ready?
We'll try some in Hidatsa.
Hey.
Okay. Hey, Valeria.
Hirohiri?
Hey.
We're going to go with some basic signs. I'm going to say the word in Hidatsa, and Lanny's going to give you the sign, the visual sign. Huh. Na. Hiro. Hiri. Go. Go to. Aguka, Mchtako, Fra, Hiroga, Na.
Okay, those are just some basic ones that we estimated that the best time to learn is in the morning, and some of the most effective learners are probably from 12 to about 16, and they could get up to like 40, 45 in a half hour. But what that needs is we need this reinforcement. And so, like, for example, the next step, like, for example, we're working in among the Little Shell tribe, the newly recognized tribe. We were 2 weeks ago in Missoula. We were working on some phrases they wanted to record in Ojibwe, and there's only 3 people left that speak that particular dialect of Ojibwe, because it morphed with Michif, morphed with some Assiniboine, and there's some Blackfeet in it, but it's still primarily Ojibwe. So we use these basic English phrases like this side, Hirigyo, Ig, over here, Oguga, Balay Kun, between us, Balay Ashojin, in front of us, Balay Pijin, behind us, Dia Kagola, on the other side of you, King Konowajik, that's where they're sitting on the other side, like if we were in a gym. So we put that peripheral, that not only is it just like sit, you're thinking sit beside you, sit next to you, sit on the other side of the person, sit in front of them, sit behind them, sit together, sit over there, and sit on the other side of the gym. And so that was what I did in Crow, basically, but that's what we were doing in a recording of phrases in Missoula 2 weeks ago with that Ojibwe dialect. I believe it's close to more the language they call Soto. Not necessarily, it is Ojibwe, but they call that language Soto. The French spelling, Salteaux. Anyway, we'll feature a few more words in Hidatsa.
A. Neha. Elwekets. Elweketats. Iga. Nigigor. Awag. Niruha. Nushka. Gibadaka. Ni. Nidamarawi Dewey.
Okay. All right. Read those in English.
Okay. How old are you? Where did you come from? Where are you going? What is this? Who is that? What time is it? When was that? How far is it? What did he say? Give this to him. Take that.
I said it, I made a mistake there. I was saying giving it to her.
Oh. Okay. Take that from her. Okay. I am going to work. I came from home. Give one to everyone. Follow her. Show him. Eat. Drink. I slept and dreamt. She told me. I will tell him.
Okay, that's a little bit about a method that combines rote, that combines the actions of gestures and movements, formalized by the Plains Indian Sign Language and the ancient media of this region, still spoken amongst people. I would say there's still quite a short list of people that are really functional. I know over in the Blood Reserve, they're really good at it. You go down to Kiowa country, they're excellent, as well as Crow and the Northern Cheyenne. A lot of those people, they're really functional in the sign language. Well, the Cree over there in Rocky Boy are pretty good at it too. Well, that's just a little bit. Again, like our next step was hopefully that because of the situation going on in the States today and the world, we were going to collaborate with some tech people and possibly present the continuance of this project that we're doing in teaching vocabulary using sign language on some of the media networks like Google, Meet, possibly FaceTime. So we're still exploring that. We were tentatively kind of scheduled that Thursday and Friday, but that changed. But maybe in due time, when people get settled in the schools, we hopefully should have, hopefully if the funding is carried over, we could still do that instruction. And at this time, I want to thank everybody inviting us over here. I was just joking. And then I want to thank my son for helping me, Justin, Amber, being patient with us, and everybody out there. Maybe you're in quarantine. Maybe you're praying. We think about each other like that. We pray for our languages just as much as we pray for our loved ones. We think about that. We imagine, we daydream that we'll be speaking. Those are wishes that we could have, and practical wishes. We have dreams. We could even think that. Imagine what we would say to somebody in our native languages. Carry on that way. And you can even sing it. Even like how we learn our numbers. We could say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, but we could do it in our language. Hawada duba dawi shuba choho aga sapu duba pa hawada pa pirige. I'll call it good there. I hope.